Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also, video presentation. So, some comments and maybe some more extra stuff. We'll just see how, I can't imagine the comments will take that long. The one comment, one, okay, that's reasonably civil and on the subject. Just delete the other mush because it's just a waste of time. I mean, really, it's just the pointless, idiotic insults are of no value. So why keep using that tactic? Why? Yeah, it's not going to convince me. And frankly, it would only convince a moron. So what's the point? So anyway, I mean, just stay on the subject. It's physics conversation. Stay on the subject and there's not a problem. All right, but momentum is not energy. You can keep saying it. I mean, obviously, I'm arguing that the evidence proves otherwise, so just keep ignoring the real argument. It doesn't tell you how much work the object can do. Well, I'm saying exactly the opposite, that it always gets the right answer about how much work you can do every single time. So unless you point me to an experiment where it doesn't work, where the momentum doesn't do anything, that it isn't effective in telling you how much you're going to create movement in the universe, that the movement in the universe tells you how much movement there's going to be in the universe, is the simple argument. That if you just follow the momentum, it'll always be findable and followable. And again, think about what the third law says. Yeah, well, the third law is a equal and opposite reaction thing. And it's really about one class of circumstance. When there's some sort of something happening that's going to affect two objects equally. Obviously, there's circumstances like, we already know this one for an absolute fact, right? That if I have a 3 mass, okay, moving with 150 momentums, let's say, and it hits at 1 mass that has 50, that what I'm going to get is 100 going this way. Oh, wait a minute, that doesn't really happen. No, it's 75 this way in the 3 and 25 this way. And then I'll get 100 going one way. So there really won't be any equal and opposite reaction if you look at it, right? Because obviously the 25 doesn't have any equal and opposite reaction that way. And the 75 clearly goes all that way. So I'm just saying it's certainly a circumstance where the third law doesn't appear to apply. So to say it's that universal, I think, is a mistake. Okay. Let's see, and think about all the collision experiments. Yes, exactly. So what we just link me to them. Link me to the collision experiments that prove your point. Okay, and I'm arguing that, well, the ballistic pendulum's a collision experiment certainly doesn't prove your point. Okay, not even close. All right. Let's see. How can the area of velocity be meaningful? So he says we're not talking about some actual surface area of velocity here. It doesn't matter whether you are or aren't. I'm saying as a concept of a physical thing that could have some Pythagorean geometric meaning, how could squaring a velocity have relevance in any circumstance in displaying what's going to happen in the universe? It's just geometrically impossible to make one. An area of territory is understandable. A volume is understandable. Okay, a volume of velocity, that's not understandable. All right, squaring velocity means we multiply velocity with itself. Yeah, we already know that part, moron. Why do we need the velocity twice? Yes, exactly. Exactly what role does it play to not twice the velocity, but quadratic increases in the velocity? When kinetic energy is turned to work, so I'm arguing it's never turned to work. So that's what you have to show me, is show me the experiment where you turn the kinetic energy into work, where it actually moves a spaceship, where it actually moves a ballistic pendulum, where it actually does physical work. Okay, the object obviously slows down. So something slowing down as something else speeds up is exactly the third law, so that's not a problem. So I don't know how you win with kinetic energy when you can't show that happening, where the kinetic energy is equal. in all the cases, like the 5-ton train, and I add 5 tons to it. Now I have a 10-ton train going half the velocity. All the momentum is perfectly conserved, and we lose half the kinetic energy. And the point is you won't show me any evidence that you lost it as anything, as heat or deformation or sparks or sound. There'll be no evidence of any collection of any dissipated energy. Its initial velocity v tells us how much velocity it can lose before stopping, whatever, and it tells us how far it travels during the time it is being slowed down. So again, this bullshit about time and distance, and it always just has to be understood that there's no distance involved in, say, a gun, all these other mechanisms. The acceleration happens in such a small amount of distance that it would be unmeasurable. This is why the velocity is squared. It's not an explanation. It's just mush. So I pointed out, you're just reciting from your Bible. Show me some evidence it takes 25 times the fuel to move something 5 times as fast. Now look, that's the explicit doctrine. And so I'm just saying to all you people who are defending this crap, you know that's just not right. You do, right? You know that just doesn't happen. And so that should indicate to you some reason to be fair and say, okay, I want to see more, because if that's the truth, they really should be able to show that to me. I mean, after hundreds of years of saying it, they should be able to show it. And even before they said it, it should have already occurred somewhere. Somewhere there should be some writing about how it takes 8 horses to go twice as fast rather than 2 more. You know, all kinds of arguments like that. Like, well, why is this velocity thing so hard to create? You have to do so much work to incrementally increase your velocity. The amount of extra horsepower you need or fuel is so much higher. You know, even trains or something, how, oh yeah, going that second 10 miles an hour. You know, the first 10 is really easy. The second 10, shit, we have to use 3 times the fuel. Where's your evidence? Show me the ballistic pendulum experiment where you collect more than 0.06% of the kinetic energy, or something more than just the momentum. So the real trick is if they collect, okay, anything above this tiny percentage, you know, it could be, you know, it depends on how much kinetic energy going in with what the percentage is going to be, obviously. But some small percentage of the kinetic energy, and the fact is you don't collect all the momentum either, okay? So you lose a little tiny bit of momentum, and you lose a gigantic percentage, 99 plus percent, okay? Not 9 plus percent, 99 plus percent of the kinetic energy is gone, okay? And it's not demonstrated to be anywhere else. All right, or something more than just the momentum. So again, we know we can conserve some substantial portion of the momentum with a pendulum, ballistic pendulum, and we can't conserve any almost portion of the kinetic energy. All right. Demonstrating the kinetic energy can't do real work. It can't do anything. It can't move a spaceship, and it can't move a ballistic pendulum. And you people are so arrogant. I just don't get it. Why are you so aggressive in your defense of a theory that has so little evidence backing it up? Why? I just want to know the answer. I want to know why you are defending something for which there's shit for evidence. Okay. So you are not willing to think about the third law means in collision. So it's just a ridiculous sentence. I should just block you for that. Now, I spent 2 years talking about it and going over all of these circumstances. Clearly, I don't believe there's any such thing as negative momentum or unmomentum or anti-momentum. So direction doesn't frickin' matter, as I've pointed out. The universe doesn't say, oh, if you're going this way, it's minus, and if you're going this way, it's plus. It doesn't say anything idiotic like that. All right, it says any motion is real motion, and it has to come from something. Something has to give something motion. All right, show me some evidence it takes 25 times the fuel to move something 5 times as fast. So let's see this preposterous answer to the simple expectation that you should expect to be able to provide evidence. And instead of evidence, it's this bullshit. More mush. I can explain how we know that it is true in ideal conditions. So where? What ideal condition? Where's it true? And where's the unideal, the condition that's so unideal that it doesn't show up at all? I mean, you can't get much more ideal than the rocket example. I mean, here you are in empty space, and all you're saying is what's going to turn my spaceship? I'm going to shoot a bullet out of the spaceship, or I'm going to shoot a recoiling gun. Okay, I'm going to throw a watermelon, or I'm going to throw a grapes. And the fact is that, you know, your calculator says the grapes have more kinetic energy, but the spaceship is going to say no, they don't. It just depends on how much mass with how much velocity, and that's all. Kinetic energy will do you no good. The bullet will not turn your ship more than the recoiling gun that has 1,000 times less energy. The thing with 1,000 times less energy will do just as much work on the spaceship. Now that's the fact. That's the ideal fact. All right. Fuel is burned to create pressure. So this is baby talk. Obviously, it depends on the circumstance. But obviously, in the case of a rocket engine, it's not there to create pressure. It's releasing pressure. I mean, that's the simple argument. It's not really creating pressure. It's expelling matter, okay? And you're expelling it with energy. This pressure creates a force that makes the engine spin. So this is baby talk. So, I mean, this is, you know, it's just so idiotic. You're going to waste people's time, you know, reciting nonsense that we all agree on and pretend that has something to do with the argument. And it has nothing to do with the argument. The amount of momentum gained depends on the amount of time the force is applied. Well, there you go. yeah, momentum is force times time. That's right. Energy is force times time. All right, kinetic energy is nonsense. It doesn't exist. It doesn't do anything. Okay, the same amount of fuel is used in every cycle to create the same force. So you're just talking baby talk. Get to the part where you use 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast. Get to the part where 5 times the compression of a spring is 25 times the energy. Get to that explanation of how that can possibly be possible in light of Hooke's law. And as the engine spins faster, there is less time for the force to create momentum. So just more nonsense. Obviously, to go faster, it has to spin in a shorter amount of time to the velocity required. So the final velocity will be created quicker. So what? This is how we know. I mean, that's like saying a spring decompresses quicker when it's releasing a light object, and it releases slower when it's pushing a heavier object. So what? All right, we know that twice the fuel is not twice the velocity. So you know it. How do you know that? This is how we know that twice the fuel is not twice the velocity. Of course it is. If you're pushing the same thing, your losses are going to be the same, and you'll end up with a pretty proportional outcome, just as Hooke's law demonstrates. With a little bit of math, we can conclude that 4 times the fuel is twice the velocity. So, and 25 times the fuel is 5 times the velocity in ideal conditions. So he's saying it's absolutely true that it takes 25 times the fuel to spin a motor 5 times as fast. And he says if we don't see that happen, that is, we see magic happen, where the motor spins with only 5 times the electricity, it goes 5 times as fast. If that magic happens, it's because there was a whole bunch of losses. Yeah, no, you got it all backwards. Your theory is required 25 times the fuel to do something it only takes 5 times the fuel to do. So you can't use some nonsense about how the environment is breaking the idealization. No, you're saying the idealization is 25 times the fuel. That's the ideal conditions. So it should be even worse if I do it in unideal conditions. It should be 45 times the fuel to spin it 5 times as fast. I can't get it more efficient in the unideal circumstances. Dumbass. Okay. I beg you to tell me how this is wrong. Well, I just did tell you how it's wrong. There's no evidence. That's the first sign of being wrong, is there's zero evidence. Absolutely zero indication in any experiment demonstrating anything close to 25 times the fuel to spin something 5 times as fast. And a ton of evidence indicating, yeah, it's probably more like 4.5 times actually, because the unideal circumstances, actually bearings work better, different things get a little more efficient the faster you go. So you'll actually do better than the ideal. Okay. I didn't include the math because I know you don't really care about it. I don't care about jargon and gibberish. So, yes, obviously I don't think you have any reason to say per second per second. I don't think Newton had any idea that it's 9.8 meters per any number of seconds per second. No, it's 1 second times 1 second. That's it. The end. It's all in 1 second unit. When it says seconds, slash second, that means 1 second. It doesn't mean 10 seconds. It doesn't mean 70 seconds. It means 1 second. Okay. It's 9.8 per 1 second units of time. That's the explicit absolute truth. And you denying it and making these arguments is just demonstrating that you're willfully deceptive and a liar. I mean, it's just a willful lie to say Galileo and Newton didn't understand it to be 9.8 meters per 1 second. Show me the ballistic pendulum experiment where you collect more than 0.06 of the kinetic energy. So that's my assertion. But the idea of the ballistic pendulum is to demonstrate conservation of momentum. Who cares what the idea? What do you mean? This is just baby talk. Obviously, it doesn't demonstrate anything else, so you can't use it for some other purpose. But the fact is, it's a simple experiment. You're saying, let's catch the energy something has. All right, that's the objective. And what the ballistic pendulum demonstrates is that the only energy the bullet has is the energy the recoiling gun had. Okay, all it has is momentum. The collision is obviously not elastic. So again, it's not, there's no elastic, inelastic rules here. There's just how much energy went in and how much energy comes out. All right, you're saying 2,000 joules go in, 0.06 joules comes out. And you say that makes some sort of sense to in Newton's mechanics or Galilean mechanics or my mechanics. And obviously, of course, I would say, no, show me. The kinetic energy is mostly used to drill the hole into the clay. So absolute nonsense. We know it's a tiny portion of the momentum is lost, and that little portion of momentum, 10% or so, is what drilled the hole and heated the clay, obviously. The kinetic energy is mostly used to drill the hole into the clay. You can't drill holes for free. So he's saying 1,999 joules of energy were required to drill the hole. Okay, and that's why the ballistic pendulum only went 0.06. Okay, so it just, this is just so overtly denying the truth. What you should be saying is, yes, it is sort of interesting that we can't, with all of our technology, collect more than 0.06 of the kinetic energy. We should be able to do better than that. And then we will be stuck with a paradox, because then we will be actually collecting more momentum than went in. And so we'll have to explain how free momentum is a real thing, and yet nobody has capitalized it. Not a single free energy nut has figured out that all he has to do is bang light things into heavy things and make lots of free energy. I mean, I'm just sitting here saying, I mean, how can I look at you as anything other than, the creeps of planet Earth, because you'll lie about science. You'll lie and pretend you have some sort of evidence when you have zero evidence, and you've had hundreds of years. Like I said, they've been doing energy experiments for hundreds of years, water wheels, all kinds of stuff, and this never came up. There's nobody who wrote 400 years ago about, oh, this is a terrible problem, how you can't make something go twice as fast without putting in 4 times the energy. I mean, it would be there if it happened. And the fact that it isn't there should bother you. You should be saying, gee, I don't want to be arguing something that has zero evidence. This is like, back in the evolution days, when the one guy said, "Oh yeah, the giraffes are reaching, and that's what's causing their neck to get longer, is because they want it to get longer." And that their eggs somehow know how to make baby giraffes that have longer necks because the mama was trying to reach things higher and higher. I mean, it's an idiotic theory on its face, and then you got the fact where you have no mechanism and no way to prove it. And then the Darwin gives you the simple explanation, was just natural selection, random errors. And the random errors mean that if you do something that's conducive to your survival through these random errors, through these little cosmic rays fucking up a piece of your DNA, and you're going to have an advantage, and you're going to be more likely to survive. And that's a perfectly rational explanation. But you're just like the religious kooks. You're just clinging to this nonsense, even though there's all this evidence saying it's not true. And you're saying you're honorable human beings? You're religious fanatics, as described. There's nothing else to say. You're just, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. You're not going to you're not helping the world any by keeping it stupid and dumb. The least you could do is just say, well, yeah, I have some reasonable doubt, and I would like to see evidence. The least you could do is say, yeah, I would like to see these experiments done. Science should really back up their physics. They really should drop 4 pounds 1 foot and 1 pound 4 feet and see if those are the same force, if the same impact happens, the same smashing of the ground. They shouldn't just say it's true. They should show it to be true. You should be able to say those words and say, yes, that's what science is all about. Showing it to be true. Not saying it's true. Showing it to be true. And I'm saying to you, quite obviously, all the experiments indicate it is not true. Okay? Except for these little fringe experiments where, again, they use non-friction carts that just happen to have little tiny wheels that are made out of metal. Which isn't the most brilliant way to make a non-friction cart, especially when you're doing a linear momentum experiment. All right. So, just such bullshit. It's just really disgusting that you just keep typing this crap. And this was after you already typed some crap here. So you like the third law? Oh, fuck. What an idiot. The third law, again, the gun is the perfect example. From momentum, perfect conservation of momentum. The gun recoil equals the bullet's momentum. So everything is conserved, everything is Newtonian sensible. Okay, your theory just makes an absolute mess out of it. Obviously, no conservation, no equality in the energy's direction, no equal and opposite reaction to the explosion. So, you're just such scum. Anyway, all right. So maybe we'll do some bucket experiment stuff. I'll throw that in for fun, just because Newton did put it in the beginning of his, I think in the definition section actually. So where he made this whole argument about establishing that there really is absolute space and relativity is just incidental relativity. It's not any real relativity. There is no relative frames in the 3 dimensions of space where the laws of physics are different, or anything like that, where you can be in your own little frame having your own little clock ticking your own weird time. That don't happen. Alright, so I'm back. Alright, so let's talk a little bit again about Newton's original, I think he was the first person to make arguments against an absolute relativity versus an absolute physical universe. What a shitty bucket. Anyway, all right, anyway. And what he did was, he observed a way to demonstrate, that you can't take relativity too seriously, because there are ways to make it clear that motion is going to be an absolute thing. And the fact is that spinning objects, generally speaking, hold that key. And the way he illustrated with a spinning bucket, just twirling it on a rope and then letting it spin and observing what the water does. And so you can have two views of that. If we look at the bucket from its side, what you'll see is the water will, as the bucket spins faster and faster, the water will rise. And it has nothing to do with fighting gravity or gravity. It just has to do with the water as it's spinning. Is always trying, it's always getting pushed sort of in straight lines. You could sort of understand the little molecules are just saying, just like a planet Earth or something in gravity. They're trying, to go straight. And they're getting hit by a second force that's pushing them. So they have a velocity that's a straight line, and the velocity keeps getting deflected by another force. And in the bucket, the other force is this wall. So they want to go straight into the wall. They want to go straight into the wall. And the fact is, going straight into the wall means you're going to end up deflecting. And the other part of that is there's only one place to go. So it's sort of like in the ocean, you could argue that the waves on the surface are created because the pressure going one way can't create more pressure. So it's pressurizing in front of it. It can't create more pressure that direction because it doesn't have enough pressure to do that, but it's more pressure than up. Down is out of the question because there's more pressure there. So it has to go up. No choice. And once it goes up, then as soon as there's any reduction in the amount of pressure of the downward direction, it's going to go back down again. And then, that's going to create more pressure and back up again. So it's going to keep doing this waving thing because there's no place to get rid of the pressure, and gravity is going to keep applying a pressure to restore the surface. And so these two competing things will fight with each other, and that's why you get a wave on the surface. But the real action is that the water's going in straight, going up, going back down again, going straight, going back up, going back down, going straight. So that's the real action. And in this bucket, the same kind of thing is happening. And so going up just happens to be less pressure. Obviously the wall is unacceptably hard, so the force can't go through the wall. So it can't win doing that. Going down again is just going to be more pressure because there's a fixed amount of stuff and it's under pressure and you can't go down. So it doesn't have any choice, in the terms of it's creating more pressure in front of it except to go up the side. So that's what it does. It goes up the side. But what we also know is the water is attaching itself to the surface. So there's adhesion between the molecules and the surface, and that's what starts the whole thing swirling. So it starts on the outside and eventually gets to the inside, and it just keeps pushing the water further out. So there's always an outward force from the center out. And so that's why the water has to go up, is because there's nowhere else for it to go. There's no room going down, so it has to go up because you can't compress water, at least not easily. So, and so the basic statement is that you can't create this. There's no idea of some equal circumstance or equal condition that will create what's happening here. These have to all be real velocities and real attachments and real events. You can't claim that the outside universe is going some speed to give you the illusion that the bucket is spinning, that the external universe is spinning. Because yes, that'll make the bucket look like it's spinning, but it's not going to change the water. It's not going to make the water go up the sides of the bucket, because obviously the gravitational force or whatever forces the universe is excreting, it's excreting them evenly. And so moving something that's even isn't going to help you at all. There's no way that could create the opposite motion in the bucket. The water moving the opposite direction. So it's kind of obvious that, yes, okay, this isn't an illusion. It isn't, this isn't space where you can just say, well, I'm going to be an observer here, or I'm going to be an observer here, or I'm going to be an observer here. and claim you can create a universe where all those observations could match. They're not going to. The only conclusion all observators can conclude is that this is spinning, because it's dragging the water with it. The bucket is dragging the water with it. So it can't be framed or converted into some equivalence principle where somehow the actions are equivalent, because you can't create them by some pervertiverse perspective where you say, well, let me just pretend if the whole universe was spinning, could I create the illusion, okay, that the experimental results would be the same, and they wouldn't. And so I think it's, considering Newton's time and everything else, it's a pretty clever and decisive argument against notions of expansive relativity. I mean, clearly Newton's not disputing that two people can drive in a stagecoach and they can throw a ball back and forth and there's no problem, being able to throw it at the other person, even though the understanding is the ball's actually traveling a diagonal line. Each time it's thrown, it's moving diagonally forward because it has more than one velocity. It has the velocity back and forth, and it has the velocity of the stagecoach that you're giving it because you're holding it as you throw it. And so every time you hold the ball, you're giving it your velocity. And so it contains that velocity when you let it go. You don't undo that velocity. All right. Yeah, so for what it's worth, I mean, it's again, these, it should give people doubt, and it should make them think that, okay, yeah, this can't be, you can't diagram this as being an equivalent perception, because it won't, the universe won't look the same. Spinning the external universe will not make the bucket look the same. What's in the bucket look the same. It won't happen. The water won't rise to the sides, and it certainly won't start spinning in the opposite direction. All right. So, like I stated many times, I can only do my part. I mean, I can make these arguments, and you can just sit there and say, "Oh, so what?" Or whatever you're saying. I can't fix it. They're wrong. But you don't say anything. You don't do anything. There's no evidence that it bothers you. That physics doesn't address these real issues and subjects, and it just pretends it can just tell you what the truth is, and you're all supposed to believe it because they're smarter than you. Well, what I'm saying is they're not smarter than you. They're cleverer than you. Okay, and they've come up with a clever pile of bullshit. But it isn't even that clever in the sense that they'll do experiments like the ballistic pendulum that overtly show kinetic energy is useless. It can't be converted into work, and yet claim it's the real thing. It's the energy that matters, even though you can't convert it into work. All right. Now, enough of video and such. Till the next time. Blah, 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 blah.